Hello everyone, it's time to be impacted, informed, enlightened, and entertained. Please put up your feet, get cozy for a refreshing time with us on the program.
Yes, John, we're excited knowing that once again we have the opportunity to become better people and bring about positive change to our peculiar circumstances. This is Today with John and Helen Live, the family-centric program on PlusTvAfrica, and I'm Oma Helen Odeleye. It's a huge pleasure to welcome you on board.
Oh yes it is, and we bring greetings from the entire team at PlusTvAfrica. I am John Senaya. It's good to know you're going on well with the week and you're joining us on today's cruise. Yep.
Okay. So how was your week? And the hustle and the adjustments to the present situation. Not to worry, tough times do not last, for this too shall pass now. It's a great show we have put together for your pleasure today, so let's not keep you waiting for too long before we get started. A break, we will launch just about now so that we'll get the next segment in place. Please stay with us as we go on this very quick break. Join us again.
So thanks for staying with us and welcome back. They are everywhere, most of them bridging the gap between the haves and the have-nots. They are non-for-profit organizations, NGOs like we know them. Today, we get a better understanding of how they operate and who is qualified to be a beneficiary. A lawyer and development consultant is at hand to answer all of your questions.
Yes, and also on the show today, we beam the searchlight on artist selling and talent management from the perspective of public relations and entertainment. Akinyele Soul Child, a public relations and entertainment social pop culture analyst, will see us through that terrain.
Yeah, and they say the eye, they say, is the window to our world. How well informed are we when it comes to the, to caring for our eyes? An ophthalmologist, a heavy word for me, will be with us today, and he will try and sort us out, with our questions as we settle into this week in retrospect. Yes, Helen?
Yeah, John, this week was good. This week was good. High points for me.
Yes.
The maiden flight, by Airpeace.
Was that this week? You are like 1
week late.
Direct
from
1 week late for your flight.
That's a high point for me. Last week we rushed through the show.
Yes, that's
and
right.
It's been trending. There's so much conversations around it.
So kudos.
And it's very heartwarming that
Kudos.
you can go direct from Lagos now to London and at a cheaper rate.
Yeah, and you can go direct on the Third Mainland Bridge too.
Oh, good news! Yes,
it's open at
both
last.
sides. I saw it this morning.
So all of that
beautiful.
pain,
And what else?
Well, that'll be for now. I have my guest here and I'm itching to ask her questions.
Okay, all right. Okay, so many things happen, but let's keep that, for the news people to bring them up to you. So the lessons I have learned, from a lot of things that happened this week is that even no matter how things get tough, most Nigerians are having to deal with it, cutting their clothes according to their sizes, and just living a normal life. There's no more, showing anymore. You're not looking at what someone else is doing anymore. You're looking at you and how you can survive and get through this phase. And I think it's a very good lesson that we all have learned.
Yeah, and it goes beyond even showing, because now we hear that electricity rates are going up. Well, after all, Nigeria has moved from the #1 happiest people in the world to number 6. How about that? It's time to look at project funding for NGOs with Fabia Ogumeko.
Fabia. And our curtain raiser is the conversation focused on funding for NGOs, challenges, opportunities, and strategies. Our first guest is ready to give it a blast.
Yes,
John?
a blast indeed. She's a lawyer by profession and development consultant with over, I won't say several years post-call working experience. Founding trustee of Amara Foundation. Our guest also sits on the boards of Montgomery Security Vaults Limited, as well as the Foundation for Cancer Care.
Yes.
She's an alumnus, of the University College London, Bayes Business School, City University London, and the Nigerian Law School. Our guest she currently leads in designing, curating, and executing high-impact social development initiatives and projects at Adara Foundation. She's a lady and a professional who is passionate about the pursuit of development in Africa and the role of women in enabling that to happen. We bring on stage Fabian Ogumneko, lawyer and development consultant. You have a huge task at hand on the show, madam. First, let's put the names in the right pockets.
Yes,
Fabian.
It's Fabia
Yes.
Fabian Ogumneko.
So I got it right.
Right.
It's Fabia Fabian.
Or we can just say Fabia Ogumeko. So Fabia Fabian is my maiden name, Fabia Fabian. I'm Rivers, Fabia Wari Fabian. And my marital surname is Ogumeko. So Fabia Fabian Ogumeko.
We'll run the test again tomorrow morning. Wake me up and ask me.
Okay, this certainly will be an interesting and exciting conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here again. Nice to see you.
John, are you starting?
Yes, really, I want her to please share some of the insights into the current landscape of NGOs in Nigeria and the types of projects that typically would come up in our environment.
Okay. Excellent. So I think, first of all, maybe we should just even start by explaining what NGOs are and what they do.
Yeah.
So NGOs are non-governmental organizations. They're also known as non-for-profit organizations. By very nature of how they are formed and what they're set out to do, profit is not the primary purpose for which they're set up. They are organizations, they're legal entities, but they operate really to promote a social benefit, a social cause, a social good. And they play in that very fine space. They're often referred to as a third sector. They play in that space between private sector and public sector, being government. So NGOs serve to push forward perhaps agendas that governments may not have the full capacity. And when I say full capacity, it's not about technical capacity, but more around the footfalls or to be able to, or the footprints to reach everywhere. So they play in that stopgap, and they also play where private sector may have interest, but not necessarily, it may not be profitable, it may not be part of the interest in terms of their overall goals, which really is about making profits for their shareholders. So they play in that fine intersection and are able to work as a bridge, like you said, between government, the private sector, and society. So they're often established to really promote a social good, a social benefit. And in that sense, they play everywhere. They play in education, they play in healthcare, they play in community empowerment, humanitarian efforts, they play even in business, even women and economic empowerment, people economic empowerment across, in human rights.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the main challenges? When you have so much to do and you're not government, okay? What are the challenges that NGOs in Nigeria specifically face when it comes to securing funding for projects?
Right. Okay, so you've already said one of the biggest challenges, and that's exactly what most NGOs would say when you ask them, what are your biggest challenges? They would say funding. But I think funding is a challenge really across all sectors. Funding is a challenge for government. Government will say funding is a challenge. And private sector, well, they're chasing funding, aren't they, in terms of profit? Yeah, but funding definitely is one of the biggest challenges that NGOs face. And they face that because we're living in a resource-limited world. We have quite a number of non-governmental organizations that exist in Nigeria. The corporate body that is for now, the regulator, official legal regulator of NGOs is still the Corporate Affairs Commission. And by the last count, and I don't have the most recent data, there's certainly well over, definitely 150,000 plus NGOs. And I'm sure there are more. I'm sure that's not like the most accurate data. And a lot of them work in similar spaces. But they work in similar spaces because there's also need. As you know, in the country that we live in today, there is vast need across the areas that we spoke about. And so the fact is that a number of these organizations are chasing the same sources of funding. So where do they get funding from? Okay. Philanthropic donations, so charity, just me and you as individuals believing in a cause and donating towards that cause because we believe in the cause. They get funding from grants, and usually grants come from international donations or indigenous philanthropies. They get funding from the corporate sector through sponsorships or partnerships. And a lot of organizations, well, not a lot, but more and more NGOs now understand that they need to diversify, and perhaps we can talk about that later. They can have trading entities that also help in funding some of their own initiatives. They can do consulting, contracting, being a partner to government. There's so many ways in which they can tap into resources. But of course, like I said, these resources are limited, but there is a way, and there are many of them who understand the way and are thriving.
Yeah, unlimited sources, but limited.
Potentially unlimited sources,
but at the same time limited.
I'll say that cautiously.
Yes.
I mean, it's about how innovative you are. There are some typical sources,
yes,
and a number of organizations understand that.
Yeah.
But again, one needs to be innovative and creative.
Yeah. Now, for the typical sources, we all tend to be heading in the same direction most of the time.
Yes.
Because these are typical sources. Yes. Donor fatigue sets in at some point, and I think that should also be some of the challenges that you would face.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Well, anyway, there are specific funding sources, and grant opportunities, that are more accessible or popular among NGOs in Nigeria. Do you want to highlight a few of them?
Okay. So types. Yes. Okay. And there are many, or they are varied. Let me not say many. They are varied. So grants, one source of grants is indigenous. So we have Nigerian philanthropists. We have Nigerian indigenous homegrown philanthropists. Of course, you have the likes of the Dangote Foundations, the T.Y. Danjuma Foundation, the Tony Elumelu Foundation. I must mention some women-led foundations. There's the Folorunsho Alakija's Foundation, I think it's Rose of Sharon. There is the ACT Foundation, which is sort of heavily supported by Access Bank, but independent. And then there are many. There are many individual, foundations, family foundations
who are deliberate,
about funding. But then they fund specific things.
Okay.
They fund things that are in alignment, either if they are a foundation tied to a corporate entity that is in alignment with the the goals of that corporate entity, or they have their own lines of interest. Anyway, those are some indigenous, and there are more. There's a Sheikh Musa Yar'Adua Foundation. There are quite a few of them. On the international donor,
and the Rotary Foundation.
And the Rotary Foundation, which you are very part of, which you are part of, yes. And they do great work, but then they're not indigenous. So I was sort of speaking about indigenous. Okay. So moving on to international foundations, the Rotary Foundation, the Ford Foundation, who are present in Nigeria. There is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and quite a number of them.
So many of them.
Exactly. So and then you have, like I said, government also has initiatives in which they fund. You have institutions like the World Bank and the embassies. The embassies also fund. A number of the embassies do projects. The UN entities. So there are quite a number, and these all give grants. So these all give grants.
So let's quickly look at the complexities and the requirements.
Right. Yes.
That the operators or the founders of these NGOs need to be able to access funding.
Okay. So one of the first things is you have to be registered. You have to be registered. You can't just be. So a number of NGOs operate. They start and they're already operating for even a number of years just doing charity, right? But if you want to now be in a position to really tap into, funding opportunities and good sources of funding and scalable opportunities, then you need to be registered. You need to be registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission, and there are usually two ways that NGOs can register. You can either register as an incorporated trust, or you register as a company limited by guarantee. Those are the main two ways you can register.
Okay.
And then beyond your registration with the Corporate Affairs Commission, sometimes, depending on what field you find yourself playing in, you would often sort of at least make your presence felt, and if there are registration processes with the ministries, the state ministries that sort of delve or deal with the kind of work that you do. So for example, the Ministry of Women Affairs and Poverty Alleviation in Lagos, if you're a Lagos state-based NGO working in women, Ministry of Youths and Sports and Culture, if you're working in that space. So you make yourself known to those kinds of institutions, and some of them have registration processes. Then governance is very important. Even if it's a one person, initially visioned, founded organization, you cannot work alone. Okay. So you must have a board, either an advisory board or a board of trustees, depending on how you are set up. And if you're set up, a group of people come to want to promote a purpose or a cause, then you will probably be founding trustees. You need that legal structure properly defined. Then you need systems in place. And it doesn't matter whether you started yesterday or you've been around for a long time. You need to plan if your goal and mission is actually to do something good and do something meaningful. You have to put these things in place or plan to put them in place.
You have to tick off.
Yes, within the shortest period of time. So having a governance structure in terms of your trustees being registered and then fulfilling the compliance mechanisms every so often, right? So the first 18 months usually of registration, you are, giving a bit of a leeway to be able to put yourself together and begin to raise the funds and put your processes in place. But from after a year and a half, you're expected to do returns and there's some corporate legal requirements you're expected to do. Of course, you must have staff, whether it's volunteers, whether it's interns, whether it's paid staff. You need to have a base of people who are going to support you in doing the work, who you can account for, because there's nobody that will give you a grant to a one man and say, because you're doing such great work, all the money comes to you, right, and to your personal account. You have to have a bank account. You have to, be legally set up, again, because nobody will pass funds to your personal.
Tax-free, the funding?
It's tax-free for those who give. It's tax-free for the philanthropists or the organizations who donate. Their incentive to give is because there's some tax reliefs. So that is why corporate sponsorship and corporate engagement and partnerships is one way of accessing funds, because there is something in it for the corporate organizations. For you, it's not tax-free.
You have to pay tax.
You don't pay tax on the revenue, because the revenue is not profitable. Okay. But your staff, once you get above a certain number of staff, pensions, pensions, payee tax is relevant for those who work within your organization, depending on your numbers.
This is huge. It's not just like we just take it for granted that
a lot of people just take it for granted.
So much in the box.
You can do that, but it depends on what level you want to play. Do you understand? So it's okay for me to just do my philanthropy in my village and do sponsor education projects and water projects or whatever it is I want to do and give back. That's fine. Yeah. But if you really want to work as a non-governmental organization and scale. And scaling is important because of impact, right? Yeah. There's so much you can do alone with little resources. But the more you are structured, the bigger your vision. And the vision needs to be big, really, at a certain level, because the need is big. Okay. And I hope there's time for me to talk about collaboration, because I think that's another.
Maybe we should just go into that.
I'm sorry. The implication of all of this is what we call stewardship.
Right.
Accountability at the end of it all. Right. I mean, you have to, at the end of it all, now give a proper account of what you've done.
And that's a prerequisite of also accessing even more funds. If you are given, like you said, you have to be able to account for what you've done with it. Otherwise, you can't even access more. And a lot of organizations have shut down because they are unable to account for the funds that they've received, and by virtue of which nobody will go near them. So there is actually, it is very important to have those accountability principles.
Definitely would
place. And it's interesting because accountability goes both ways. There's accountability on the side of those who receive, so the NGOs who receive the funds and implement the funds. And they do this through sort of periodic impact reports, holding stakeholder engagement sessions where they're able to share what it is they have done and what they've been able to achieve with the funds that they've received and the beneficiaries and lives touched.
Absolutely.
But on the corporate side as well, let me just say with corporates who also give, corporates are, the reason they are corporations is because they have been given, they are citizens, we call them corporate citizens. right? And they are corporate citizens because they've been given a license to operate. And as with every citizen, there are rights, you know. So even on the corporate side, as you give, you must be accountable.
All right, I guess finally,
Yeah,
she was talking about partnership. She said she would love to talk about partnership, right? Before the show.
So that's another way again of accessing funds, right? Again, because a lot of NGOs operate at quite a, I would say, micro level in terms of their reach and what's, you know, their sort of, you know, pool of where and, you know, where they're able to sort of engage. And again, because of the issue of limited funds, the more NGOs are able to find other NGOs who do similar things and collaborate and do things together. And project funders like that. They like the idea of coming together in, you know, as a consortia or, you know, in that sort of way and accessing. And it means that you're also able to do more and reach more.
Wow.
So as a parting shot?
I just want you in 1 minute, because we've run out of time.
Wow.
Because there's something I've really, you know, thought we should look at, you know, at this point, the future. Because from all that you've said, it looks like we would be streamlining the key players in the NGO space. Okay, so how do you see the future for NGOs?
So, like I said, NGOs, for me, they play a critical part. And in every society, they, you know, from time immemorial, there have always been organizations that sit in this position between government and commerce that help to sort of, you know, also push advocacy, rights-based work, and, you know, grassroots engagement. And so there will always be, I believe that there will always be the third sector and the need and the existence of NGOs. So it's really about innovation. Just, you know, NGOs are also enterprises, they're businesses. It's just that they're organizations, you know. It's just that they're not set up to make profit. And they can make profit. It's just that it's not called profit. It's called surplus revenue or surplus income, and it's plowed back into the organization to continue to promote the mission. And so it's about innovation, thinking around, you know, innovation in terms of how, you know, they operate, how they do things, you know, bringing in technology into efficiency to make their processes efficient, because NGOs, you know, typically are not, because they're so dependent on, resources, donations, grants, those sorts of things. They operate usually a very lean structure. So you won't necessarily find that those that work in that sector are the best paid, for example. But there are other benefits. There are things like training, capacity building. So innovation, collaboration, you know, being part of networks, doing research to understand what funding is out there, keeping abreast of the areas. And I'm not suggesting that we pivot, you know, my mission is women, but today they are funding health, so I moved to health. It's just being on top of the game and understanding where some of this funding is and where funder interest is, and being innovative. And looking inwards within your own organization to see what you can also do.
What needs are available.
It could be merchandising, it could be trading to support your efforts.
Okay, so we'll make that part one. Part one.
It has to be, because there's so much more to unpack.
I mean, even the Holy Bible says that the poor will always be around.
Absolutely.
You know, and so there's need for the NGOs, you know, to come and assist. So it's reassuring to know that the NGO business, if I can use that word for it, is no longer an all-commerce business. You know, with all that you said, where beneficiaries are,
you need to be strategic.
They are short-changed. Sometimes we hear that the owners of the NGOs get all of the funding, and the projects for which they've got the funding
suffer.
You know, suffer. So it's good that we have been told that there are a lot of things on ground to ensure that that doesn't happen so often anymore. John.
Great. So we're going to pause there.
Thank
and
you.
You'll get another invitation, you know, and I hope you'll be able to to honor it. Your schedule is always very tight.
Yes.
Okay. No, well, I should find time for us. Always find time for us.
So I just wanted to correct, I actually run an initiative called ADABA, not ADARA, because there is a foundation.
It's ADABA. Yes,
ADABA. Yes, there's a foundation that exists called ADARA. So mine is ADABA Initiative and IMARA, not Amara.
Okay, ADABA and IMARA. Yes. Okay, wow.
Right. So that'll be it for this segment of the show.
Yeah.
I want to personally thank you. very
Thank you,
short
John.
notice,
Thank
and
you, Helen.
Thank
you
you.
were able to come around. So we look forward, the viewers too, look
part
forward
two.
to part two.
And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty.
We will.
Okay, we will.
Stuff.
We sure will.
All right, so time to take another break.
We'll take another break.
And when we come back, our next guest will be with us, and we will be looking at entertainment, the entertainment industry that has become such a mega money spinner, providing job opportunities for many. When we return from this break, John, it will be time to unveil building a successful career in entertainment and public relations. Akinyele Sochild will be our guide then. So please, don't change the channel. We'll be back shortly.